Oftentimes when we get something that's brand new and super shiny, we have a high level of interest in it and it has significant value to us. But over time, as the newness wears off and it's maybe not as shiny, the interest and the value in that thing actually decreases. Unfortunately, this often happens when it comes to relationships. By the end of our session today, I want to help you. I want to give you one big idea that will help you to not only maintain value in a relationship over the long haul, but I actually think you can increase the value in a relationship even when it's no longer new and even when the shine has worn off. As a bonus, I want to give you another challenge to help you put this big idea into practice this week to help increase value in the relationships that matter most to you. Why are these challenges so important? Well, remember what we talked about in session 1 when we said this: when you put love into action, you actually feel more attraction. That's what these challenges are all about. It's putting love into action so that we can feel that attraction once again. So we've got a little issue though that we need to take a look at, a problem that's a hurdle for us when it comes to valuing relationships that we need to deal with before we get to the big idea. So let's take a look at what that problem looks like. I don't know about you, but when something is brand new and is still super shiny, I have a high level of interest in it, and I also value that item with a high level as well. Unfortunately though, over time, when something gets older and it's no longer shiny, my interest in it and the value of that object tends to decrease. The same is oftentimes true in relationships. When I think back to the beginning of my relationship with my wife, Kristen, I think back to those times when I had a high level of interest in learning everything that I could about her. I wanted to know everything about her upbringing, about her family, what were her favorite holidays, what were the favorite type of clothes that she loved to wear. I wanted to know everything. So much so that even though I don't love to shop, I went along with her when she would go shopping so that I could learn how she shopped. Even beyond that, I began shopping for her when she wasn't around so that I could surprise her with some of her favorite things. The same thing happened with Kristen taking an interest in me. I'm a huge fan of sports and I love all types of sports. One of my favorites is the game of cricket. When I was younger and when Kristen and I first met, I was actually still playing cricket. Cricket can be a slow and for some people even boring game. But because she was so interested in our relationship, she actually came along to cricket games to watch me play cricket. I remember one time having to go over to her and tell her to not cheer as loudly because that's not the kind of thing that was done at these local cricket competitions. See, when a relationship is brand new, it oftentimes piques our interest and it holds high value for us. But over time, our interest and the value in that relationship can decrease. So I think there's a solution that will help us not just increase our interest, but over the long haul, in the relationships that matter most to us, it can increase the value of those relationships. Let's take a look. When it comes to problems of long-lasting love, of staying in love, we've already said it in previous sessions that it's difficult for us to find a solution to these problems by looking around at others who have done it successfully, because there's not many examples for us to really learn from. Here's what we discovered though in the last session, that from some old ancient Jewish and Christian scriptures, we can find some wisdom and truth that will help us not just fall in love, but stay in love. We also discovered that you don't have to be a Christian or be Jewish in background in order to learn some of these powerful truths. In fact, in last session, we looked at one of the most famous statements of Jesus that we discovered baked inside that statement were the foundational truths of long-lasting love. Today, the solution to the problem that we're trying to solve of the diminishing value and the diminishing interest in a relationship that has lost that new shine and appeal, we're going to find the solution to that problem through one of Jesus' first followers, a guy named Paul. Paul was a prolific writer in the first century. one of the first leaders of the church in the first century. He wrote letters to both individuals and groups of people all across the then known world in cities located all around the Mediterranean rim. In one of his letters to a group of Christians living in the city of Philippi, Paul identifies by describing the attitude of Jesus how we can actually find long-lasting love, how we can stay in love even when the newness and the shininess of a relationship begins to wane. So let's take a look at Paul's letter and find out what this solution is. In Paul's letter to the Philippians in chapter 2, he begins to explain how we can keep the value and the interest high in relationships. Listen to these words starting with verse 3. He says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit." Essentially what Paul is saying, in relationships, there should be no competition. There should be no correcting each other when somebody didn't quite get the details of a story right. There should be no competition when it comes to making sure that you are seen as smarter than the other person. There literally should be no competitiveness when it comes to long-lasting relationships. Paul goes on to say this, rather than that competitive nature, there should be humility, valuing others above yourself. In session 1 of this series, I gave you the You First challenge. Humility says that I will step aside and I will allow you to go first. The You First challenge helps us to, rather than be competitive with each other, to actually have humility and to allow the other person to go first. Paul continues, he says, rather in humility, valuing others above yourself, not looking in to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. That's what it looks like to be humble. That's what it looks like to value others above yourself. Not only do you put others first, but you actually take an interest in the things that they are interested in. Now, naturally speaking, I'm typically interested in the things that I have an interest in. Let me repeat that. I know it's humorous and it seems a little bit silly, and maybe right now you're like, oh, let me write that down. That's so profound. But the reality for all of us is we all are interested in the things that interest us. Most of us don't take an interest in things that are not interesting to us. But if we're going to value others above ourselves in humility, it requires for us to take an interest in things that other people are interested in, even if you or I are not interested in them. That's a difficult thing for us to do because it doesn't come naturally. It's an unnatural thing, even maybe a supernatural thing, which is why following Jesus is so important. Because when we become a follower of Jesus, Jesus actually comes and lives inside of us. I can't explain exactly what all of that means, but I can explain this, that the things that don't come naturally to you, the unnatural, can actually take place in your life because of Jesus empowering you and living within you. Jesus can help you do something that's unnatural, like taking an interest in something that's not interesting to you because it's of interest to another person, even though you don't naturally do that. So I want to give you a challenge. But before I give you that challenge, let me just read for you the attitude that Jesus had, that Paul describes for us, that enables us to play out this interest challenge. Here's what Paul said. In your relationships with one another, have the same attitude of mind that Christ Jesus had. He says, this is the secret. Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus literally made himself nothing, even though he could have leveraged his position as God for his own advantage. He made himself nothing and became a servant. That's the attitude, that's the mindset that it takes for us to show an interest in others, to set ourselves aside and to put their interest before ours. So what does it look like on a practical level to take on the interest of another person above our own? The challenge for this session that I want to give you, I've entitled the Interest Challenge. And here's how the Interest Challenge works. I want you to pick one person. Ideally, it's going to be the person that you chose for the You First challenge from last session. Pick a person, and then this week, I want you to do a couple of things. I want you to identify one significant interest that they have that you don't have. So make sure it's not an interest that both of you have, but it's an interest that they have that's unique to them that you don't have. For me, it's going to be the interest that my wife has in cricket. Not the cricket, the sport, like I mentioned before, that she took an interest in for me, but this machine right here is called a cricket. It makes all sorts of incredible crafty type things. My wife loves to use it for making signs that has lettering on it so that she can give them away as gifts or even hang them around our house. This cricket machine is not an interest to me naturally, but here's what I'm going to do this week, and I want to invite you to do the same thing. Pick the person, pick the interest, and then each day research something new that you don't know about their interest. I want you to have a conversation with them about that new research, and then at least one time this week, I want you to participate in the thing that they are interested in. For me, I'm going to have to get on Google and research all sorts of new things about the cricket machine and the opportunities that it has to make crafts and discuss those with my wife. And then at some point throughout the week, I'm going to invite her to allow me to participate in using the cricket machine and creating some sort of a craft. That's the Interest Challenge, and I want to invite every single one of you to participate in it this week because I think it will revolutionize your relationship. Before I let you go from the house though, I've got one last thing that I need to remind you about. Don't forget what we said at the beginning of this session, that over time, even in relationships, when the new and the shiny begins to wear off, oftentimes our interest in that relationship and the value of that relationship begins to decline. But here's the bottom line. When you let your interest show, the value will begin to grow. When it comes to your relationship with that person, when you let your interest in them show, your value in that relationship will grow. Remember, you don't have to be a follower of Jesus yet, or even a Christian or a Bible person or a church person to put into practice this incredible truth. All of us can do this, and I want you to imagine at the end of this week, doing the Interest Challenge each and every day, the difference that it's going to make, not only in your interest level, but in the value that that relationship has in your life. It'll be back to new, just like in the beginning. The interest will be high and the value will be high, and it'll bring back the shine to that relationship. I can't wait to see you for our next session.